And it's fascinating to me, even going from this conversation. We've got, you're betting the world on generative AI. What's going to happen to the future of national policy and U.S.-China relations to like, oh, new technology? I'm going to do sexy time.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm here.
Just like
every week.
There he is, man. Sometimes I come on here and I'm like, that's him. That's him. Even I get awestruck sometimes.
All right, call me the Coach Prime of investing. What can I say?
They do. Unproven?
No. Hall of Famer.
Coach Prime is not proven. I'll tell you that much.
He's got a gold jacket. Come on.
It's that's true. It's kicking off soon, though. I'm very excited. We've got a couple more weeks. I'm very excited for that season kickoff.
Yeah, sorry. My podcasting skills unproven.
There you go.
But I'm in the investing Hall of Fame.
There you go. That's very true. Speaking of unproven, Mr. Michael Burry wants everything to crash, has billions of dollars saying everything's going to crash. Is that proven?
There's a lot to the story, Doogles. First of all, he doesn't have billions of dollars betting against the crash. We'll get into that in a second. He made quite a social media storm unintentionally because people didn't know how to read his 13F. But the funniest memes going around with him is Michael Burry has predicted whatever, like 15 of the last 2 crashes. He's become branded as this perma bear, which makes me chuckle. But hey, he's still in the game. This is what I kept thinking about all week. It's like he took a bet against basically US stocks this week. And it's true that he has been bearish on US stocks, probably more than most, or maybe more vocally than most. But he's not bankrupt. He's still in the game. He has plenty of money. He's doing just fine. I don't understand the criticism necessarily. It's fine to be defensive if that's your approach.
I didn't read about criticism. What I read was what you were discussing around how this is the person that bet against the housing market, and we all saw what happened then. Now he's betting against the stock market aggressively with 80% of his portfolio. What does that mean? Right? That's the narrative.
Which okay, so let's just dive into the nuts and bolts. Unfortunately, I didn't calculate the true numbers, but I'll give you the gist of exactly what's going on here. If you have the true numbers, let's go for it. But so on his 13F, it shows up that he did put options against SPY, S&P 500, and put options against QQQ, NASDAQ 100, with a market value of almost $1.6 billion.
Billions,
which would represent 93% of his portfolio. What people failed to understand with this really caused a buzz when it first released, whatever, Monday, Tuesday morning last week, is that that's the value of these put options if they actually hit. That's not the value of his bet. The value of his bet is probably significantly different. Now, we don't know the expiration date or the terms of these puts, but call it maybe 2% of that, is his real bet. Now, that is still a significant bet because if it doesn't hit, he loses all that money. But we don't know if he bet, 3 months out or 3 years out, really. We don't know anything about this other than he's bearish on U.S. stocks at the moment, and I think there's plenty of reasons to be.
And we also, with 13Fs, we also don't know if he still even holds the bet.
Exactly, yeah.
This is 45 days ago, and this was the individual, if you all recall, 10 months ago, that only owned prisons. And so the swiftness at which he will adjust his portfolio is like Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift. Was that's too? I went too far. He changes his portfolio a heck of a lot. So who knows exactly what it was? It could have been a hedge for a moment. It could have been a bet for the future. Who knows? But I found it the narrative around it I did find to be fascinating, because if you think about that narrative, 93%, of his portfolio betting against the US stock market is aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, this made me want to like just crawl into a hole, go on vacation, and not, because like uh, Twitter/X has changed their algorithm recently, where it's what gets promoted to the top of their feed is more based on replies than it is likes
Mm.
and stuff. And so the doomsday scenario got sent to the top of the feed, and I felt like that was amplifying bad news, because the tweets that generated conversation were the ones that misinterpreted the 13F. It was a lot of people going, that either that's crazy or that doesn't make sense. And then those go to the top of the feed. So there was a dude, fairly popular dude, who literally wrote a tweet about, I don't often follow 13Fs, but the Michael Burry news really caught my attention. And what I did today is I bought some puts on SPY. He misinterpreted the information. He actually made a trade based on it. I mean, come on, guys. Like, you're just caught up in the noise at that point. Run away and do something else. Put your phone down.
And when we were talking about gurus, a couple weeks ago, there's this feeling I believe that people get that's, well, they know something I don't know. I think you were mentioning something around that. Like if there's information that if you don't necessarily have access to a whole bunch of information, you're a retail investor, there's an assumption that you make that folks have insight, information, whatever it might be that you don't have, which many people, I mean, if you take like a Seth Klarman, they do have information you don't have.
Yeah.
But in Michael Burry, I'm sure also has information you don't have, but you don't know what their bet actually is based on. We said that a million times. So I think what you just mentioned, put your phone down, I think is exactly right. Get outside, go for a hike.
Doogles, that's some wisdom. And that's the show, guys. Go for a hike.
Go for
Peace out.
Take a hike.
All right. Now, while you're on your hike, you can put your earbuds in and continue to listen to the show. What's next in your fishbowl, Doogles?
I tell you what, this post this week that I think the spirit of this, like this type of question, is the type of question that is so healthy to ask. The question is this: what if generative AI turned out to be a dud? It's by Gary Marcus. Now, this wasn't a statement, right? There's no statement here. He's not saying generative AI is a dud, but the question is super valuable. I'm going to read a little sousson from this to tell you why I think this is valuable. Here we go. If hallucinations, he actually closes with this, so spoiler alert. If hallucinations, for those that don't know, hallucinations are when generative AI starts to talk about some bunch of nonsense. If hallucinations aren't fixable, generative AI probably isn't going to make $1 trillion a year. And if it probably isn't going to make $1 trillion a year, it probably isn't going to have the impact people seem to be expecting. And if it isn't going to have that impact, maybe we should not be building our world around the premise that it is. Oh, you making squinty eyes, so I'm curious about your view. What I like about this question here, and the point that's made in this paragraph, is when there's such a strong belief that a thing is going to occur, and he talks about building our world around the premise that it is. When there's such a strong belief, there's infrastructure that's built, there's narrative that goes into it, there's work, there's jobs, there's all sorts of stuff that is impacted by a speculation. And the question here is, can we just imagine for a second if that speculation doesn't happen and you've now just built your house of cards potentially built off of it? Did you hear my Bane voice in there? I don't know why that just happened, but
I have questions for you first.
Go for it.
Who's saying that AI is going to make $1 trillion a year? Let me give you some context. Apple is the most valuable company in the world, valued at about $3 trillion. And they're not at a price to earnings ratio of 3 right now. They're not making $1 trillion a year or anywhere close to it. So where's that premise even come from?
He doesn't in here. I do not believe, I'm going to take another look, but give some kind of equation around it. I believe that $1 trillion is directional, but it makes sense to me because if you think about globally, this is talking globally about what AI is the premise of what it's meant to do or expected to do. People are talking about how you're going to replace entire industries, how they're going to be like robots that are built around whatever. You look at like what's happened with Nvidia stock, right? If you add all this stuff up, $1 trillion doesn't seem
Okay. No, I
wild.
can live with that premise. I guess there's some tweets from Benedict Evans in this article saying like basically I've used Chat GPT for a year and a half and it's kind of cool, but it's not really moving the needle for me. It hasn't actually fulfilled the hype. That's basically how I feel about it. And I think maybe just in the past 6 to 8 weeks, Doogles, a lot has changed here because the hype cycle of this went off the charts at some point. It was like there will be no more jobs, and Nvidia stock will go to $7,000 a share. You know, but
Yep.
lately I just don't see the buzz. And when I play around with it, I think it's cool. I especially like the photo creation stuff, but the photo creation is almost a perfect example. It's like this cool image that you can't really do anything with. It's like, wow, that looks neat, but how does this change my life? Usually it doesn't.
And in that Benedict Evans tweet or X, whatever, that's up here. One of the points in it is mentioning how there isn't yet that killer app, so to speak. And so he says it may be the new PC, but we don't have the spreadsheet or word processor yet, which were early applications of the PC that really took it mainstream. Now, what we do have is what Skippy was talking about not quite a year ago, is search. It's still a fascinating and like solid use case for AI, but on the everyday consumer front, we don't have like that application that exists yet. So that's why I think that this question is a really important one, because in everyday convos, I hear maybe not $1 trillion bets, well, definitely not $1 trillion bets, but these bets where like the conversation is such around, well, what are we going to do? What is your team doing? What is your team doing with AI? How are we using AI? It's just like, do we need to reconstruct the fullness of how we work? I understand the idea of saying we should make sure that we understand this thing, that we're like staying on top of how it's moving because there should be impact, there are productivity increases, like, you can, all that stuff I get. But sometimes it does feel like the conversation goes to re-architect to make sure that we're ready.
I hear you. And I think in your industry, maybe that's more relevant than it is in mine. I was really fascinated with ChatGPT for a while in terms of like writing, basically using it for copywriting. And it eventually, after say 3 weeks to 5 weeks of use, it reminded me of like a former employee I had managed who wasn't a particularly good writer and would take 3 key points and turn it into like a 7-page email.
Bunch of
and
fluff.
it's like this doesn't work at all. Like this just wastes more time for me because you're putting in a bunch of fluff to try and, I don't know, explain or have a large output and a large output is not needed. The more you work with executives, how a lot of times the CEO of the company wants you to write like one thing in the title of the email and that's it. Like, I need X. That's all they want. It feels like the opposite of that, where it adds complexity to the writing to try and sound smart or something. And it's like, no, AI, this doesn't actually help me at all.
Yeah. I'm going to read one more paragraph here. And I think, in my opinion, he takes it a little too far in this, but I still think that the point, people should internalize this point. So he's saying if AI is going to be like the next big thing, right? And so if AI is not going to be bigger than fire and electricity, right? If that turns out to be mistaken, or at least doesn't bear out in the next decade, it's certainly possible that we could wind up with what in hindsight is a lot of needless extra tension with China, possibly even a war in Taiwan over a mirage, along with a social media level fiasco in which consumers are exploited in news and misinformation rules the day because governments were afraid to clamp down hard enough. Again, may have taken a little too far, but the point here is that there are, in national policy, there are conversations that are, how do we make sure that we protect something around the conversation of AI, and what could that lead to before we even know what the heck it is? I don't know enough about national policy and global security and whatnot, but I think this is a good point. I think it's the right question to ask.
I like the question. Unfortunately, that's not changing, because here's this thing that when people relate artificial intelligence to military operations, it always goes to the sci-fi movie where the planes fly themselves and the robots do the battling for you, whatever, yeah. Star Wars, you name it, right? And so someone that goes, it's crappy at writing my emails, is different than two of military superpowers being like, yes, but if their fighter jets are going to be better than ours when they're unmanned, that means they have this huge advantage over us.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that hypothesis, I don't even know how we got here, but like in that hypothesis, who cares about the fighter jets? Because it's really whoever drops the nuclear bomb that really, like you get to the end of days pretty quickly. But that's why that tension is not going away, because there's high level people in both governments that are going to say, I don't care about all these other applications that matter to Skippy and Doogles. This is the application that matters to me.
And I get you making this real, tangible, taking it literals. But my broader point, I'll bring this back to our general world of investing and investing psychology right quick. When I read this, and this comes out to the global scale and what I was just talking about, but when I read this and think about it from the investment psychology lens, think about portfolio bets, think about concentration. When people get caught up in the narrative of a particular equity or set of equities, or betting against the market, whatever it might be, you get caught up in that. You go, I'm making this bet because of insert belief here. And it's so valuable to ask the question of, what if this belief is not true? Now what happens? And if you've done all your homework, you have you've done the research, you got all that, blah, blah, blah. And the answer is, I lose money, that might be okay. If the answer is, my portfolio fails and I'm out of the game, be careful.
Yeah.
And part of what Gary Marcus is positing, at least in this, is in there some ways that we might be betting the whole house on this. What if it's wrong?
I love the questions. I mean, it's appropriate. These questions should be asked and they should be answered. It's funny that people immediately seem to want to go to U.S.-China relations, Taiwan, everything else.
It's fun.
I mean, for those two countries, it's unfortunate there can't just be more like handshakes. Let's do some things in good faith and work together. But that's probably too much to ask too.
Yeah. People are funny that way, though. Like, there isn't the idea. Human beings have this idea that if you say, yeah, what if we were just cool for the next bit? Like, what if we just
chill for a little bit?
Chill. Like it's we're incapable,
not attacking each other.
We're incapable of doing that. Yeah, agreed.
You know that is it Keanu Reeves, his quote that's going around that says, like, as I got older, I like don't even have the time for the nonsense. So if someone comes up to me and says 1 + 1 = 5, I just go, cool, man, that's awesome. Good to hear. Like, kind of just, we need some Keanu Reeves in our life and just be like, oh, we're good. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go have fun over here. That doesn't bother me. 1 + 1 = 5.
Yeah. This is representative of what humans like to do. There's this woman last night. So went to this concert. Woman walks up to the row that we're sitting in and wanted some conflict from the moment she got to the row, was seeking conflict. So at the end of the row, we could hear her look over and go, there's gonna be somebody in our seats. We're like, what does that, like, that's a different statement than, oh, there's someone sitting in our seats. Like, she was like, there's going to be, like, I am going to will that into existence. So then she scoots down the row Everyone has to stand up, scoots
Yeah.
down the row, gets to us. And it's the seats are the ones right next to my wife and I that are in conflict here. She goes, "That's our seats." And the two people sitting there went, I think they're our seats. She's like, "Those are our seats."
She was
And
in the
they're
wrong section, right?
yeah, exactly, right? But she was so, from the moment that she was coming down. So first of all, there was a declaration that she has now willed there will be people in her seats. Then she was, from the moment that she then started talking, I knew those weren't her seats because of the confidence. Like when someone comes with that level of confidence that it's their seats, I was like, there's something. She's so confident that she had to have missed a fact.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? And
exactly.
so then I'm like, okay, how do I? Because I'm looking at her phone. Like these aren't her seats. I'm like, how do I get in? I see the game of double dutch going on right in front of me, and I'm like, how do I jump in? How do I jump in here without escalating? Um, and so I just kind of like pointed to like the section, and then she just went, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "What? Why did you?" And anyway, that's what happens though. That's what people do. Like you come
Yeah.
in, we need to push tension and conflict. We have to. We desire it. Okay. What's next in your fishbowl?
I don't like this, Doogles, but I'm gonna call some people dumb. Okay.
Okay.
And not anyone in particularly, just humans. Humans are
Mm,
dumb sometimes. All right.
that's true. That's very true.
Bloomberg did a breakdown of how people feel. If they feel rich, if they feel poor.
Mm,
And there's one quote for me, like the whole article is good, but it really breaks down to this. So if you make 175K per year, you're roughly in the top 10% of earners, roughly.
okay.
So those making at least $175,000 a year, which is roughly the amount to crack the top 10% of US tax filers. In that realm, a quarter of those people told us that they were either very poor, poor, or getting by, but things are tight. By income level, there is no classification that they are poor or very poor. It's an
Very poor.
impossibility. It
Very
means they're in
poor.
the top 10% of US tax filers. But by how they feel, they can feel very poor. And a quarter, I'm not talking like, the 5% out there. I'm talking a quarter of these people feel that they're basically either barely getting by to very poor. Humans are just stupid, man. That means you don't know how to manage your finances any way, shape, or form. It means you're completely caught on the hedonic treadmill. And every time you got the pay raise, you just had your expenses rise equally so you can continue to feel very poor. I understand how this happens, but I just continue to be flabbergasted by it.
There are, in this piece, there are some anecdotes in here and then some quotes they have about like when they talk to some of the folks that were in these camps as to like what's behind that feeling. Part of it is about location. So there's this woman, Deborah Corbin, 67 years old, retired in Naples, Florida. And she says, when I'm in Southern Illinois, it's where I'm from, I feel rich. When I'm in Naples, I feel blessed. Down here, it's hard to feel rich because they're billionaires down here.
Yeah.
I get the part of the location piece that I do get is if you have $10,000 and you're in rural India, that can go a long way, like cost of living wise. But this is much closer to how I feel because of where other people are. If I have $1 million and you have $1 billion, that doesn't make me less rich.
It makes you feel less rich.
No, I mean, it could. For Deborah, it could. But it like, why? If you say, if richness is measured by the amount, like my purchasing power. My purchasing power does not change based on your purchasing power. My student loan payoff does not change your student loan payoff. Do you see what I mean? But people have to compare.
I see what you mean, but there's a little semantics there, which I understand, but it's your feeling of being rich is different than you if you are actually rich. And this article is about how you feel.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, you can
I
have
get
two
that.
people that are very rich in Naples, Florida, but one could be 10 times richer. And because of that, the other rich person probably doesn't feel rich.
And there's a difference between not feeling rich and feeling very poor.
Absolutely.
Like,
Oh, absolutely.
do you know what poor is?
I don't think I think these people have probably lost touch. Not throwing shade at anyone, but yeah, if you're in the top 10% of earners and you feel poor, you've probably lost touch with what poor is, right? Could we say that?
Yeah, yes, and very poor,
Yes.
very poor. I mean, this is for really though. This is it's really important, and we've actually hit on different pieces, elements of this same like conversation a few times over the last maybe even couple of years around like America losing its hustle, its touch on like the value of the American dream, the view on the it's like it's kind of all around that same theme. And I also enjoyed in this piece how they broke down different angles. So you have the premise, the basic premise of it, or the foundation of it, I should say, is what you brought up around how much money do you make and do you feel rich or poor? That's the basic foundation. And then they started going to, as I was just talking about, do you location? Do you think moving to a different part of the country would make you feel richer or poor? Most people, no matter whether they felt rich or poor, said, no, it won't make no difference. It was like about 48-ish% of people, something like that,
Yeah.
said it wouldn't make a difference. Around 30% of people said it would make them feel richer if they moved. What I thought was interesting there, though, is my expectation, given if I just read the rest of the piece and hadn't seen this chart, this graph, I would have assumed that more people that stated they felt very poor would have said they would have felt richer. If you extrapolate that point, that going to a place where people have a different financial situation than you can make you feel richer or poorer, then moving should have an impact. So I thought that was surprising to me. Then there was this question around worrying about money. Something around 25% of the very poor worry about money. That actually felt kind of low. But then you get like another 20% of people that say comfortable, and another probably about 10% of people that are rich or very rich that worry about money. This might come down to the definition of worry. I don't know how people define worry, but because if you take worry as I think about on a frequent basis, then I can kind of get that. That might be why you got rich, is because you think about money on a frequent basis. But I thought that those points were interesting takes building off that foundation.
Let me add to that. Here's one thing. I don't know that this matters, but it was kind of interesting. If your goal in life was to feel rich or very rich, and you believe this survey data, two things that appear to move the needle there are owning a home and having a home that's worth a significant amount, more than 500,000, even 1 million is better, and then having retirements accounts worth more than 1 million. If you do both those things, you own a home that's valuable and you have a large retirement. I mean, this is kind of common sense, right, Doogles? You were less likely to feel very poor when you're in the top 10% of earners. But it still might be worth something, because going through life feeling very poor doesn't sound fun to me.
No, it it does not. It's worse to be very poor, I'd
Much
imagine.
worse. I want the flip side of this study, because This is just like classic personal finance, behavioral economics type stuff. There are lots of people that would classify as poor that would feel rich based on the blessings they have, based on the times they get to spend with their family, based on the the other blessings of their life. Those people have got it figured out in a way. Like I'd love to see the flip side of this, because basically all this says is a high level is life's not about money, and if you're living your life for money, you're doing it wrong.
And we've also seen more where people, there's not hope. Like there was something in here, I can't remember what, but it was like, I feel poor and I will always feel poor, or like I don't feel rich and I never will. It's something like that. I feel like I saw a quote in here, and that's where it's like, that's just some psychosis. Sorry to take us there, but
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, the like this article ends with a guy in Texas who owns a Texas house, owns the Hawaii condo, and is stressing about paying his son's $25,000 a year tuition. I mean, dude, that's not you. You're not poor. You got some luxuries in there. There's plenty of expenses that we could streamline and make your life a lot easier. But it's I don't know if it's keeping up with the Joneses thing or what. Like it's not all of those expenses are necessary, man.
who are the Joneses, by the way?
I've been trying to figure that out my whole life. I thought they were the Doogleses.
The Doogles, that was the original statement. I just didn't catch on.
What's in your fishbowl?
Oh,
Ooh,
oh, I got to talk about sexy time.
don't do it, Doogles. You don't have to.
I, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, over the last few months, there's been continuous buildup. I mean, it's been happening over time, but over the last few months, there's been more continuous buildup of Cruise and Waymo, specifically the companies that are building toward autonomous vehicles, getting closer and closer to something becoming real. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, San Francisco was like, it's time. Cruise, Waymo, it's time. You can do this. You can do 24/7 autonomous vehicles, do your thing. And there are some issues, right, that have been hit. Like there was a not a pileup, what do I want to call it? Like a traffic jam that was
Yeah.
created because they all got confused. There was a car that drove into wet cement and got stuck there, like straight out of Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
There
That stuff's
all
gonna
sorts of this
happen.
stuff. Yeah, stuff's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. We're building toward technology. But then this industrious group of individuals said, I know what, speaking of killer apps, let's go back to the AI conversation. I know what the killer app for autonomous vehicles is. Sexy time.
You can you explain the article a little more succinctly here? According to what is this?
I'm beating
According
all
to
around the bush.
the San Francisco Standard, some people, I mean, they found a few people. This is where the sample size is. I'm always like, okay, so you found someone who might be lying to you because you didn't check the video evidence. Whatever. They found some dude named Alex and some girl named Meg or something that claimed to have had sex in a robotaxi. There we go. I got it out for you.
No, it's not just when I say sexy time, this is like aggressive multiplicative copulation.
Okay. Well, this article's bizarre because the girl's like, yeah, I just jumped into the vehicle in a robe, wearing some slippers. Like, okay, I have a take. It's about a one sentence take. You're on video, people. I understand the desire. I understand that this is probably cheaper than a hotel room or whatever. But like, come on, you're on video. Everyone knows you're on video. It sounds like they're not checking the video in real time. Good for them because that's creepy. But like, I don't really get the premise here, guys. There's probably better options.
San Francisco is gonna San Francisco. That's it. I had to talk about that though. Had to talk about that.
Like, what's your big takeaway there? I'm kind of like, all right, this might be unintended consequence of things that happen. What one they show a picture in here looks like this is a massive space because there's no driver. I don't know. I haven't been in one of these, but it looks like there's like at least 4 seats that face each other and stuff. Is it really that nice? Have you actually
I've
been
not
in
been
one
in
of these
one.
things?
I've not been in one. No, so I don't know. But it's got to be inviting. I mean, if you're going in there in your lingerie and your robes and whatnot, like it's good. I don't. What, did it pull right up to like a house? Like I don't. Were you walking through San Francisco in this robe? That I don't know. I don't know how you got there. My takeaway is that it is human beings are fascinating, and it's fascinating to me even going from this conversation. We've got you're betting the world on generative AI. What's going to happen to the future of national policy and US China relations to like, oh, new technology? I'm going to do sexy time. That is the beauty of humanity.
I'm laughing over here for so many reasons, but the robe thing does not shock me at all. As you know, I office in a college town, and you would be shocked at the amount of people I see walking around town in robe. Like that's no sweat for the right crowd. Um, hilarious. All right, that was maybe a low point on the show. Let's I'll wrap with one thing. We've talked about it before, but man, there this debt driven market for US housing
Mm.
continues to have talk about unintended consequences, right? So the National Mortgage Database did a breakdown of the number of outstanding mortgages by interest rate at origination. Basically, what interest rate did you have when you bought your house?
Yeah.
66% of those Doogles are under 4. 23% total are under 3. And 90-ish, 95%, that's a rough estimation, are under 6. Current rates are at 7. I mean, this is a whole thing that has ramifications for the housing market, which has ramifications for new construction, which has like this just might be the biggest domino.
Say more. How does that domino start to fall in your mind?
Okay, well, so on top of this, again, complex adaptive system. So on top of this, you have a lot of communities. Austin, Texas is a recent example where if you believe the data, you have 12,000 Airbnbs and 3,000 homes for sale. You have people who are locked into their homes at, say, a 3% rate that have no desire to sell because the economics of moving somewhere are so drastically different if they're going to have a 7% mortgage.
Yeah.
It's the 3% mortgage. It just seems like we're in a gridlock time for mobility and housing. And that has so if you just talk on the mobility front, that has ramifications for companies trying to attract talent from different locations. If you're talking about housing is this huge stimulus of the US economy. So people frequently talk about the best way to stimulate the US economy is cut interest rates, not only because that reduces the cost of debt and encourages people to spend, but because when people buy a new house, then they are almost guaranteed to go to Home Depot to do these chores, to hire the contractor to get the kitchen the way they want it. And that spending cascades through the economy. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know that I can articulate it well, but it's a big deal.
Oh, it's definitely a big deal. We don't know exactly where that's going to go, but I think what you're talking about makes sense. People are going to be stuck. I think when you don't have optionality like that, then it creates I don't know what the right word is. Some kind of like blockage in the economy.
Yeah, blockage is not the right word, Douglas. Stagnation?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I like came in kind of like the woman at the concert. Like I came in with confidence on the word blockage, and then you pointed at my section. But no, that it is the housing market right now is interesting. And you've got, there was this big deal made about Buffett getting into a few of the home builders in like the smallest way possible,
Yes.
given Berkshire's overall portfolio. But that's going to be one to watch. It's definitely going to be something to watch over the next few years.
On the Buffett piece, let me correct or clarify something I said last week. I was talking about the number of trades in the 13F for Berkshire Hathaway. I fully understand that other people in that organization buy and sell stocks like Ted and Todd, but I'm just using it directionally. The speculation is Ted and Todd are the one that bought the home builders, but still, you get the point. It's his organization.
Yep.
They're trading much more frequently than his actual guidance. So
yeah,
just wanted to clean that up. Yeah, we'll just watch it. I mean, clearly, if you're the Fed, you're not, it'd be idiotic to cut rates simply to stimulate housing. But it also feels like the current Fed funds rate, the only thing I'm kind of confident about is that it won't stay where it is. It will either continue to go up or go down. Like it just feels like this is not an equilibrium point.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know that that's true. I mean, I don't think they're going to play with it necessarily a lot. Why not just hold where we are for a while? Like, why do you think that they're going to raise, cut, snip, snap situation?
Okay, so my time frame here is like 24 to 36 months. I'm not talking about anything that happens in 2023.
Okay, yeah.
Really.
Right,
So
okay.
yeah, in 2023, I could see them being like, well, inflation's down, but job postings in certain sectors are way up, but general employment is steady. You know, like I could totally see them being like, we don't have anything good to do.
Yeah.
But longer term, I don't know. Let's run that hypothesis out, Douglas. So if rates stay in the fives, mortgage rates in the sevens, and that was equilibrium for the next 3 years, what would the economy look
Oh,
like? I have
okay.
no
No.
clue.
Yeah. Not when you when you say it like that, to your point, that cannot be an equilibrium.
But let's just think. Let's talk it through. I mean, what would the economy look like? So obviously, there continue to be a gridlock in housing. I say obviously, but this is all
Yep.
speculation and
Yep.
forecasting is impossible. But not forever, because at some point, people have to move. Like people just don't. Sometimes you have a forced move. You want to be closer to your family who's in bad health or whatever else. Your kids become school age and you're determined to get into a certain district. It can't just be frozen forever, which would probably mean home prices might have to come down. But right now, because the people with low interest rates are kind of stuck, they're not putting homes on the market.
I mean, it's there. We're getting into, to your point, around complex adaptive systems. Like, we're starting to get a territory that is so compounding in the like impact that each thing has that it's hard to figure out. But my head starts from the other direction that then does come back to housing. So I say interest rates are higher. People have a lot of debt. If you're keeping federal Fed funds rate high, that likely means that inflation is not coming down to the levels that you want it to come down to. It's likely what that means. So therefore, prices remain elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Debts are high. The U.S. consumer starts to get into financial trouble. Therefore, spending comes down.
Well, the U.S. consumer already spent all their last month.
Exactly.
They spent all their excess savings from the COVID stimulus measures.
Exactly.
So that's like back to its norms. It's no longer elevated.
At some point, potentially, housing gridlock forces its way out of gridlock because people need cash.
And they would sell their house to create that cash.
If it comes to that point, if you're forced effectively, I don't mean, when I say forced, I don't mean necessarily like eviction, but even at the point where you need to find cash somewhere, it could lead to housing sales.
Well, in that case, Douglas, if the U.S. consumer is really hurting, people take less vacations, which means the Airbnbs, if you go back to one of my previous points, no longer rent out. So they either are forced sales or start defaulting, which creates some new housing supply.
This is where you get into the level of complexity that's like, who knows how that impacts what.
Yeah, it's just impossible, right?
Yeah. But that, just starting from those 2 points that you brought up, I think that is a like fascinating world to start to play around with. And by fascinating, I mean, like, I feel like fascinating because it can go into multiple directions, but that's the direction that makes the most sense to me, given where some of the static numbers are today, meaning like where debt is today, where prices are today, where US consumer balances for like cash is today. It seems like that would lead to some sort of a consumer, as I've been calling it, the consumer cliff that occurs where you're not going to go buy your burrito because you need money.
And that's without even talking about significant changes in employment rates
Yes.
or
Yep.
large recession.
You don't need that. You wouldn't even need that. Exactly. Because the consumer could actually stay employed. Like, let's just go down to the individual. You could stay employed with your same income, and all of this still occurs. You don't have to change there.
Yeah. But in this example, the amazing thing is we've talked about how complex it is and how impossible it is. And we're still leaving out like 20 other factors that we know will change. That it'd be stupid
exactly.
to build a model to say an unemployment rate stays at 3%. Like it'd be stupid. Yeah. There's no way that's going to happen. And there won't be a global conflict of X, and there won't be a new pandemic, and there won't be. So
yeah,
I think we're back to where we started, which is this is impossible to predict, but that doesn't mean it's not fun to talk about.
Yeah. Yep. I love it. All right. We had a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all. SkippyDoogles@gmail.com. Premium subscriptions, skippydoogles.supercast.com. Go get it. You get early episodes, you get special episodes, and we just love being supported by you all. So thank you very much. See you soon.